Hey everyone, welcome back to The Skeleton Crew, a podcast where we feature discussions with key crew members that would be present on most film sets. My name is Joseph Boyle. Many of you will remember that last season we had a discussion with Rachel Cameron, who is a sound mixer based in the Tampa, Florida area. Last fall, Rachel reached out to me and suggested we feature Eric on an episode of Skeleton Crew. I first became aware of Eric on JW Sound Group, which is a forum for professional sound mixers. It was apparent that he was well respected for his depth of experience and knowledge ranging from production to wiring diagrams. Up until about a year ago, Eric had run professional sound services in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Unfortunately, he had suffered a heart attack, but he was in recovery for several months, and so it seemed like a good time to record some of his life experiences. This episode is a little bit different than the conversations we had in the first season. For one, Mark wasn't with me. I traveled down to Fort Lauderdale to meet with Rachel and Eric, and so we had a discussion there in his apartment. Rachel kindly recorded the interview for us, but it was more of a one-sided interview. I just sort of wanted to step back and let Eric share about his life. And so we didn't try to constrain it too much to time, so this one is a fair bit longer than the earlier episodes, and I don't interject quite as much. I just sort of drop in some questions here and there. We talk about his experiences from early on in the 1960s, sort of Mad Men era New York, working in a music recording studio, to his time on film sets, up until today. After the interview, as we were packing up our things and getting ready to leave, I pulled out one of my business cards and I handed it to Eric. He looked at it for a moment and then he threw it on the ground, letting me know that he would never contact me because my phone number wasn't on there. I thought this highlighted a moment earlier in the interview when I asked him what his legacy would be, what people would remember him for. He said that he hoped people would remember him as a pain in the ass, but a good one. So I hope you'll enjoy this discussion with Eric Toline.
My name is Eric Toline. I'm a retired sound mixer, having been in the business for 65 years, mixing sounds since I was very young.
That's good. That's good. Can you tell me, I want to just hear some kind of background. Will you tell us a little bit about your mom and dad, what they did, kind of where you come from, what your roots are?
Okay. I got started way, way back when I was about 15 or 16 years old and heard my first hi-fi set, which was the first breakthrough above home record players. For those of you who don't know it and who will agree with me that I don't look my age, I'm 82 years old. I'm recovering from a heart attack and have changed my lifestyle because of it. And this whole project is something that I've wanted to do for a long time, because I figure that as you reach the end of your career, it's a good thing to give back to the community that supported you for 65 years. There are things that I've forgotten that the younger audience has no concept of what I'm talking about at all. Just like young kids today have no concept of what a record is, or a dial phone, or anything like that. It just is technology that disappears and is only available in museums. I heard my first hi-fi set when I was about 15 or 16 years old at a friend's house that belonged to his father. And I remember looking at this refrigerator-sized speaker enclosure and going, I want one of those. I want to hear. I didn't know that existed. I had a little record player that played 45 RPM records. And I began to research it. And I bought all of the publication magazines that were out at the time. It was Audio Magazine, High Fidelity, Hi-Fi Stereo Review, monthly magazines that spoke about equipment, about music. And this was all based on music. This whole thing about movie sound was just something. It didn't exist. The entire recording industry was based on capturing the music of America. And I began to work towards building my own hi-fi set, which I did. JBL speakers. I built amplifiers and receivers from kits that you bought in a box with pieces and parts and soldering irons and things like that. And you learned how to solder and to put things together. And to compress this story, it got to the point where I knew what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. I was still in school. I was in high school, things like that. And in the summer, while I was in school, I had jobs in the industry. I worked for a time for a company called Dubbings Incorporated in New York that made pre-recorded stereo tapes that you could play back in stereo at home because stereo records hadn't been invented yet. And if you wanted to hear stereophonic sound, which comes from the Greek word stereo, which stands for solid, and phonic is audio, stereophonic, it's solid sound. It's two separate sound sources. And there was a third dimension that was never there before. You can put up 20 speakers of the same thing, and all you got is 20-channel mono. But there's no directionality. There's no depth perception. I worked for them for a while. Then I became involved with a radio station in New York, WNCN, which was a classical music station, 102.7, 101.7, I don't remember. Anyway, they had a radio show that was on every Saturday night. It was called the Hi-Fi Workbench, and it was moderated by the chief engineer at the station at the time, a gentleman named Marty Gersten. The guy standing next to me in that picture. And you could tune in. It was on Saturday night from 10 to midnight. And the first hour was a roundtable discussion by people in the industry at the time, people whose names are long gone. Herman Hosmer Scott, who was head of H.H. Scott. They made integrated amplifiers and receivers. Avery Fisher from Fisher Electronics. Everybody who was anybody in the business back in the very late 50s, early 60s. And I was listening, and the second hour you could call in and ask a question. And I had a question at the time. And I remember calling in, and the guy answered the phone, and I said, "Hi, my name is Eric Toline. I live here, here, and here. And my question is blah, 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 and blah, blah." Right? I remember sitting home and listening to them. And the guy says, "We now have a question from Eric Toline, who lives in things." And I went, I heard my name on the radio. I'm a star. I want to do that. So I became connected with the station because they needed volunteers to answer the phone. They said, "Get here at 9:30 at night and you can answer the phone." I had found my place in the universe. I began to hang out there in my spare time. And because I was, and still am, fairly good with my hands on mechanical, I became their maintenance guy, so to speak. The turntable didn't work. I said, "I'll go inside and find out," because these were the big Gates turntables, 16-inch turntable, 3 motors, one for each speed, 16, 45, and 4-speed, 16, 33, 45, and 78. Instant start. Through various ways, we began to produce programs for a company. And we did quite well with it financially, and we learned a lot. The program then went away and was taken by the advertising agency to a professional studio in uptown New York. And we floundered around for a while, did a lot of early demo stuff. I have here the original demo tape of 2 sisters doing their first guitar vocal demo. It was Lucy and Carly Simon. First thing they ever recorded. And a lot of the folk singers at the time that hung out in Greenwich Village, there was Harry Belafonte, Leon Bibb, names that Judy Collins, some are still with us, some are not, but it was fun. And one way or another, I ended up working for the recording studio that got the program we had done and began to build my career there, because this was a big studio. It was Gotham Recording in New York City, the first Gotham. It was Gotham Recording, there was Gotham Audio, and then there was a fade out, and then there were other Gothams, and there still is a Gotham Audio, excuse me, today, a great professional resource in Queens in New York, run by my friends Jim Guzzi and Peter Schneider. I stayed at Gotham for a while. We had 17 engineers on staff. We had 6 studios, editing rooms. We did everything audio, from cutting master records, mono and stereo records, doing film sessions, in other words, doing soundtracks for commercials. I worked with a gentleman there, a very nice guy who did the music for Clockwork Orange. I forgot Walter's last name.
March?
Walter Carlos. He and I worked together for a long time. I had his first demo disc that he did on a Moog synthesizer, which was his version of a song called Cherish. I can't remember the group that did it, but he did it on a Moog synthesizer. Walter had moved on to do other things and is still, I would assume, fairly prolific in New York City, doing music for who knows what. But these are some of the notable people that I worked with. You have a tendency to work with, to a certain degree, people who are celebrities. Movie stars, Broadway actors who did voiceover work. I get older, my memory is not as good as it used to be.
So at this point, how old are you? You're working at Gotham.
Let me see, I'll tell you exactly. I was about 30.
Okay.
I was about 30, and that would have been, I started at Gotham in 1963 or 4. So I was 28, 29, somewhere in there. I'm sure many of you have seen the hit show on television called Mad Men about Madison Avenue back in the 60s and 70s. I lived it. I was in the business. Gotham was the commercial recording studio.
Was it pretty accurate, the show, as to how it was? Were you drinking vodka and whiskey in your office every day and smoking cigarettes all day long?
Look at my face. I'm living the thing. Except for the stuff in the show that took place at the offices of the people at the agency, which was like me trying to figure out what goes on in your house behind your closed doors. I don't know.
Sure.
But I know what happens in my house, and my house was the studio. Gotham was the studio for advertising agencies. We were right on 5th Avenue and 46th. One block east was Madison Avenue, which was every agency in town did stuff at Gotham.
Describe the studio.
Gotham was at 2 West 46th Street, just west of 5th Avenue. We had 2 floors. The second and part of the 4th. The big music studio, which at that time was called G3, there was no 3rd floor on the 3rd floor there because we took out the ceiling and went right up from the 2nd floor to the 4th floor ceiling. We had 28-foot tall ceilings, 14 feet to the floor in a commercial building. Right. The room was rectangular. From the back wall to the control room glass was about 80 feet. And left to right, you couldn't get a true accurate measurement because there were no 2 parallel walls. Walls were angled.
Talk a little bit about what's the importance of that for people who might not realize.
Reflections of sound coming off the wall, which causes phasing problems. Things are out of phase. Reflection times are off. It makes sound. Sometimes it sounds like somebody's twisting your head. Mm-hmm. If you want to try it, take 2 speakers, put a mono source in there, and reverse the leads to 1 speaker so that the woofers, the speakers are not going this way, they're going like that. And if you sit in the middle, it sounds like your head's being twisted.
Mm-hmm. So for people who don't understand phasing, it's essentially the signal reaching the recorder at slightly different times, right? Yeah.
So what you did was, all you needed to do is pitch one wall out by 5 degrees this way, left or right, or top to bottom, as long as this wall didn't look at that wall. Mm-hmm. Right? You could look at them like this, that's fine. And it had different reflective properties on the walls. In some cases, we had cotton batting on the walls to break up the reflection itself. Just the sound would hit the batting, or like an old mattress, and the reflections time off a mattress are different than the reflection time off a sheet of plywood. Mm-hmm. Acoustic tile, anything to break up the reflection times. And you could tune a room that way, so that when you went out there and listened to an orchestra playing, you could stand where the conductor was and just listen. You didn't have to have any microphones up. You didn't have to have anything. Just stand there and listen to the orchestra. And you'd go, put something over there. Put something over there. Something so that what the conductor heard was as close to acoustically balanced. So no one particular instrument was naturally louder than another because of reflection times. Because it's impossible to mix that if the violin player is louder than everybody else and he's not trying to be loud. So there was a whole process there, and eventually we got the room tuned. It was a good room.
What were some of the mics that you were using back in that time to record those?
We had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6, I'm not clear, of small rooms for 1 or 2 voices to come in and read copy, do voiceovers. Because we did commercials. We had bigger studios. There was G1, G2, G3 was the big room. You could put 30 people in there. G4 was smaller than G3. I don't know how they got that. G4 was a great sounding room. Great. Half the size, even less than half the size of the other one, but a very tight sounding room. Upstairs from us at Gotham, a company opened up called Gotham Audio. They were the importers of Neumann microphones for the United States. You tell me what microphones we had in the studio. We had 5 of everything Neumann ever made. All Neumann microphones, 47s, 87s, 67s. We had more microphones than we had employees, and we had 30 people working there. You walk into even the smallest studio, there were 3 or 4 Neumanns on a stand. All different. Because depending upon what you were doing and what the voice was, because you were recording back at that time very basically. There was no EQ, no limiting, no compression. We were doing music sessions with 18 and 20 guys playing. No multi-track. You learned how to mix because you were mixing live. And the way you do it, because we had a standard setup in the room, piano, bass, drums, guitar, woodwinds, horns, blah, blah, and blah, blah. You went outside and you stood where the conductor stood. And you said, tell them to play. And they played. It was a 60-second music track. It was no big deal. It was for a commercial. And the funny thing was, nobody cared because nobody listened to the music. It was just there. And nobody knew, the audience that watched this on television or heard this on the radio had no idea what the music was supposed to sound like. It could have been all kazoo. They'll listen to it. But you went out there because as an engineer, it's your job to be the Xerox machine. Put this in, this comes out. They look and sound identical. Your job is done. And you went outside and you just closed your eyes and you listened to the room. And acoustically, you listened to the piano, the drums, the guitar, etc., etc., etc. Then you went back into the control room and you sat down and you began to open faders. And the way I always built a mix was like you build a house. You start at the foundation. You can't put up the roof until you have the foundation. And the foundation of any mix is your low frequencies. Drums, kick. You built that. And then you began to build on top of that and on top of that And as you went up, the frequencies went up. Right? And then you just went back and trimmed and this and that, and you did it basically by level. The boards at that time were 18, 20-in boards. No phantom power. Every microphone was powered, but it had an external power supply and something that looked like a shoebox. And on there, you could change the pattern of some microphones. You changed the output level of the power supply, and it came into the board, and you said, this microphone is a number 1, and you punched it and opened it, and there it was. So you mixed by doing this, not by adding 3 dB at 9 cycles, or 900 cycles, or 9,000. It just wasn't there. And you know what? It all sounded terrific. We were amazed that it, when you played it back, it sounds exactly like it does outside. When we used to play it back for the guys in the band, and the guy said, play that back, let's hear it. Right? You go, take it back and go, something, 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 take 3. And the music started, and you walked outside, and we had 4 Alltech Lansing Voice of the Theater speakers. Look it up. Monster. They're as big as your refrigerator. And the guys would stand there, and I'd go out, and I'd listen, and I'd go, yeah, sounds pretty good. And there was always somebody, it never failed, who was playing 3 notes on a ukulele as a little bridge thing. Right? And 18 guys beating their brains out, and this guy's going dink, 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 and he goes, I can't hear me. Yeah, well, we're not doing it again. Let's go. It was a lot of fun. The musicians at that time were pickup musicians. They could sight read. They'd walk in, they'd sit down, violins here, horns there, and the charts were already on the music stands. And these guys could just look at it. It's like reading a script, except I can't read music. I didn't have to. Right? They would look at it and they'd go, okay, the tempo is this. They'd go through and retune their instruments to whatever key this track was in. And in about 5 minutes, the guy would tell me, he says, okay, let's take one for rehearsal. Right? They do the count off. And they do it, and they'd adjust and go, oh, okay, that's what he wants here, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. 2, 3 takes, and they were done. They were done. It was wonderful. It really was wonderful. I will say, as an aside, my entire career in this business, the jobs that I enjoyed most, and I've done a lot of different things, were the ones where there's no take 2. When you're mixing a live show, there's no take 2. You can't stop. You have to, the show must go on. There's nothing like it for putting you on your A game. In this in film sound business, they blow a take, they blow a take. What do they care? Yeah. Nobody cares. Right? We'll shoot it again. We had a technical problem. We had a performance problem. A bird went overhead or something, or this or that. You can do it again. When you're doing live stuff, a one of, it's the best.
So how did this experience in the music industry translate into film, and what are some of the skills that you learned that helped as you transitioned into film?
As we were speaking about earlier, I grew up in an industry where there were no cameras. You work in a recording studio, you're recording sound, not picture. So that whole side of the entertainment business didn't exist. So you could put a microphone, and I'll use my fist as an example, right here, next to the announcer's voice or the singer's voice. Okay? And get that kind of voice of God sound. Can't do that in the film business. Can't have a microphone with somebody here and expect to get continuity. So I found out that, and I kept saying to myself as I moved from console sound into production sound, I said, this is the dumbest way I've ever seen to do anything in my life. It drags on and on and on. And you need to know your own personality. If you don't have the patience to redo something, and I can tell you from actual truth, 15, 18, 20 times, because some person thinks it'll look better if you move this an eighth of an inch, so let's do it again. It's not for me. I haven't got the patience for it. My theory is nobody will notice. Move on. So I've always enjoyed doing live theater. Live theater is the best because you have people on stage walking, talking, singing, dancing, usually running 15, 20, 30 wireless packs at the same time and following a script. Certain things you had to do certain things at a certain time. So you need to know yourself. If you're not the kind of person who can overlook a minor problem that occurred, because you can't go back and tell the audience, hold on, we're going to redo that again. You got to keep going, and somebody will look at you and you go, excuse me, I don't know, battery died. Something died. Got to keep going. And people will forgive you because, as they say, shit happens. Everything always works perfectly in rehearsal. Absolutely guaranteed. And as soon as it's time to really push the button is when it's going to screw up. It really doesn't work perfectly in rehearsal, but nobody cares in rehearsal. Yeah. Is that going to work when we have to do this, Eric? Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And sometimes it did, and sometimes it didn't. And you have to be prepared, and you know that they're going to talk to you about it. What happened? I go, we've done 800 shows, and it worked every single time. One time it didn't. It's a pretty good batting average. Stuff happens. I can't guarantee it won't happen again, but I'll do everything in my power to make sure that it doesn't, because I'll find out what caused that. That's what you face. The other part of working on a film set, for me, that I never really got into, is you have to find out, are you a team player? If you're not a team player, do not go into the film sound business, because so much of what you do is dependent upon other people doing their job at the same time. And you don't want to spend time redoing it and redoing it and redoing it when it's his problem. He can't do his job. And if it's going to make you crazy in the head to have to redo something 6 times because what you're doing is fine, but somebody else dropped the ball, there's going to be gunfire. So I kept away as much as possible from doing anything where I had to depend on somebody else's professionalism to make it right. Because sometimes you just got tired of the same thing, hours and hours and hours and hours of doing the same thing over because somebody isn't satisfied or it doesn't meet somebody's expectations or they don't know what their expectations are and they'll figure it out when they get there. Working with people who don't know what they're doing is a waste of time. It frustrates you, it frustrates me, and I know enough now to keep away from that. Part of the problem at this point in my career as I look backwards to people I've worked with and find a much younger generation. When I got started, your choices of toys to play with, microphones, cameras, etc., were limited. You wanted a recorder, you bought a Nagra as a portable recorder. You wanted a good microphone, you got a Sennheiser. That was it. There wasn't 12 different versions of things. Today, technology has allowed everybody to buy whatever you want from whatever outlet you want to get it from, whatever store. They all sell the, excuse me, the same stuff. People don't spend enough time learning their craft, their trade. And I surmise that and put it all together by saying, you don't know enough to know that you don't know enough. You have nothing to go back on. There's no analog in your life. You have no concept of what I'm talking about when I say we used to physically cut the tape with a razor blade and a pair of scissors. We would physically cut it. And you say, well, the technology wasn't there. You learned to do with what the tools that you had. Digital hadn't been invented yet. It was analog.
So what are some of the things that the young people now should be learning? What are some of the maybe real quick things, that they're missing out on?
They're relying, and this is a personal point of view, they're relying on the boxes to solve their problems. Right. The new combo, I'll call them mixer recorders from Sound Devices and Zaxcom and everybody else, are different but the same. They approach getting the end result differently, but we all get to Cleveland eventually. At some point, all of the audio is on this little reel of tape, this card, this cassette. It's all there. You're relying too much, and technology has allowed those people who make decisions to feel comfortable because we can take a one-voice commercial and put it on 12 tracks at the same time. 12 identical tracks. There's an ISO. Of course it's an ISO. It's one person. So all you needed is on one track. I'm simplifying it. Okay? They've not learned how to mix.
So define, for people who are at the base level, define what mixing looks like on a real set.
I'll give you a better one. I'll give you a visual one. Mm-hmm. And you have to go along with what I'm... You want to paint a room in your house. Okay? So you go over to Home Depot or wherever, and you find a gallon bucket of white paint, because all paint is white. Then you look at the chip chart on the wall, and you and your significant other or by yourself, and you pull out a chip color. And it's some shade of green. It's not the same as that shade of green or that shade of green, but it's this shade of green that you like. And you take it over to the guy at the counter and you go, mix me up a gallon of this. And now he's going to add various amounts of different colors, light green, dark green, a little black, a little yellow, a little pink. You know what he's doing? He's mixing the paint. Right? He puts all half an ounce of this, 1 ounce of that, quarter an ounce of this, and it's a proven formula. He puts all that stuff in, puts the cover back on, shakes it up, and he's got your shade of green. And you come home and you put it on the wall, and it always dries differently than it looks wet, but that's a whole different story. That's mixing. When you cook, if you're making something to eat, if you're putting salt on the food and you put in too much salt, you can't go back and take the salt out. It's something that's living as you go. It's taking component parts, whether they're acoustic or visual, and putting them together, and eventually it begins to look like or sound like something that's up here in your mind. It's your interpretation of how something should sound. All right? The recording of concerts, 120-piece orchestras in Carnegie Hall. Put up one microphone. The 1937 Carnegie Hall Jazz Concert with Benny Goodman was done with one microphone suspended from the ceiling. It's the only recording. It's magnificent. You hear everything. You hear, not with the fidelity as if you recreated it today, but what is acoustically missing, you make up here because you know what a drum should sound like. And even though you may be hearing a thunk, you know it should really be a whump. Right? But you're more caught up in the dynamics and the passion of the music. Right? The people who never had to worry about that were the people who went to concerts when there was no recording. You heard it live. And depending upon where you were sitting in the hall, you heard the same music. You heard it a little differently, maybe because of the reflections in the room or for a lot. People didn't care. Just the fact of being able to hear music or see movement on a screen overpowered everything else. We had never, when they first developed film and film projection, people had never seen an image projected on a wall. And there's stories when, back in the early 1900s, where they had taken a picture of a train coming towards the camera and then bypassing the camera. People ran out of the theater. It looked so real. There was no comparison. Nobody had ever seen anything like that except if they were standing by the railroad tracks. That's what the visual image did. It transported you from real to make-believe. Like the sign over the top of the movie theater that says, "Please suspend all disbelief. We will tell you what is true for the next 2 hours." And you sat down in the seat, and the theater got dark, and up on the screen it said, "Once upon a time in a land far, far away, through something, 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 and something else happened, and they lived happily ever after." That's the movie. A beginning, a middle, and an end. A gentleman I knew many years ago was a Broadway producer who said the trick is you tell them, meaning the audience, what you're going to tell them. Then you tell them. And then you tell them what You told them, once upon a time, something is going to happen, and they lived happily ever after. And your job is done. And if it's done correctly, you've transported the people from this darkened theater to another place. Because what you see on the stage in a compressed form compared to a movie, if you're sitting 3/4 of the way back in the house in the theater, everybody on stage is going to be 3 inches tall. There are no close-ups. There are no close-ups in live theater. You want close-ups? Watch a football game at a stadium. 65, 70,000 people sitting in a stadium, they're all watching a big TV screen. That's a whole nother story.
So as a sound mixer, your goal is to create the audio soundscape to take people to the other world and to interpret the sound that's on set to whatever you want to portray.
In my case, depending upon what it is you're recording, if you're doing music, especially new stuff, contemporary music today for the younger market, you have to work with the writer. Yes, I can read the tempo. I can see that you have horns here and percussion here and violins here, and we'll work it out. I don't know how you want to mix this together. First, let's capture the sound. I want the percussion to sound like this. Okay, we'll put percussion on these 28 tracks. I want the violins to sound like this. We'll put those on those 10 tracks. And you go through whatever the layering is for music. This way you can go back and maneuver things. In retrospect, after you've done your tracking session, you go, we got too many violins in here. It doesn't work. Okay, take care of those 6. Gone. They're not gone, you're just not using them. They're still there. It gives you the flexibility to separate pieces, parts. It gives you the ability to unring the bell. All right? Otherwise, you got to call people back in and et cetera. Yeah. And it works fine. When you're working from what are described as the classics, the sheet music is there. Everybody and his grandmother has played it. Is your interpretation of a Mozart concerto going to be significantly different than his interpretation? You're both reading from the same script. Maybe more emphasis, maybe you're speeding up the tempo, maybe you're doing a lot of things. In that respect, since you're not going to be changing the music, the engineer's job is to come out with a mirror image of what went on live in the room that you recorded it in. All right? If you're doing something with music, especially where you want to immerse the audience in the music, and you put up 8, 9, 10 different microphones so that you can basically be sitting in any part of the theater and hear it differently, that's fine. But when you go to a concert hall, even if you're sitting at 10th row center, you've only got 2 ears. You're hearing reflections coming off the walls. Sometimes you may be hearing a mix of live reflected sound and electronically supported sound to help to balance out the room. But your job is to listen to the orchestra. That's the performance.
And that's one of the criticism of younger people, I think, much of the time, like you said, with they look to the technology to fix their problems, but many of them can't hear, and that's kind of a common criticism I hear. What are your thoughts on that?
People who know me know I can be very opinionated, and I don't suffer fools gladly, because you're not listening when I'm talking to you. It costs a lot of money to produce a contemporary record today. Studios, musicians, this, that, the other thing. And I'm going to throw out a number, and it doesn't matter. Let's say by the time you get finished, it's cost $300,000 to produce a major contemporary hit, or what could be a hit with the names who are popular today. The finest equipment, the best microphones, the best engineers, the best. And eventually, all of this stuff gets worked on in post-production, and they come up with a mix. From the 98 tracks, as Ray Charles says, I don't care if it has 90 tracks. How does it sound? They've taken all of this stuff and played with it and squeezed it and touched it and hugged it and kissed it, and now they have a 2-track mix, a left and a right. And they put it out, and excuse me, I'm not familiar with all of the terminology, as an MP3, an MP4, an MP5. It's not a WAV file. That somebody downloads to their wristwatch and takes a pair of $2 earbuds and sticks it in their ears and listens to it and thinks it's the greatest thing since canned beer. Impossible. The fidelity isn't there. The dynamic range isn't there. It's compressed beyond belief. It sounds like music, but there's no texture to it. There's no love. Everything is at the same relative dynamic range or level. And yes, I have a gun. We can kill the dog. What happens is there's no dynamic range. If I'm screaming and yelling and you're whispering, we should be at 2 different levels. Not like this. It's the same problem you have when you go to the movies. And there's this long shot. And there's these people down by the ocean, 200 yards away, and it sounds like they're standing right next to you, talking in your ear. It's a tough problem. You want the audience to hear what they're saying. But if you can't record the voice from 200 yards away, you'll never hear it over the noise of the space. So you do this, and we accept that. We accept that. It's like you and I walking, and no matter where you are when I talk to you, it always sounds like I'm on the phone to you. The level never changes. It's the magic of the movies. We change our perception of where we are acoustically. Yeah. We'll accept the fact that we're seeing people 300 yards away and they're 3/4 of an inch tall. That's fine, because if I'm standing here and you're 300 yards away, that's how you're going to look. Right? But don't bring their dialogue so it sounds like they're whispering in my ear.
And that's changed over time, though, right? Because older mixes, you would sort of hear the room a little bit more, right?
Well, they're not the ones who make that decision. Part of the problem, and again, depending upon what area of audio recording you're doing, you, as the sound mixer, can make the decision. Part of the problem is that you, as a sound mixer, can't make any decision. The director won't allow it. I want to do this. Yes, I know these people are on the back side of the moon because we can see them, but I want to be able to hear them like they're standing next to you. And you go, but that's not reality. That's not real. When you're doing it in live theater, the audience becomes part of that. They know when they see something on stage and Tom is whispering, I love you to Mary, and he's whispering like this, the audience gets quieter because they want to hear what's happening. And I love you spoken at an intimate level has much more impact than him standing up and screaming, I love you for comic effect. It just doesn't work. So the audience becomes part of the emotion of the scene. That's why you have music in the movies. It triggers your emotions. It's a happy scene. Old Yeller didn't die. You don't cry at the end of the movie. Okay? It's a powerful, very powerful motivator. Which is a whole nother thing about how music is used to motivate the audience. Cheer the good guys, boo the bad guys. Luke, I am your father. You know,
Sure.
different music for him than for Princess Leila.
Yeah. Can you, you mentioned sort of the relationship with the director. Can you talk a little bit about how, in your experience over time, and feel free to use an example, how are sound people perceived on set, by the rest of the production? Are they seen as very important central figures, or are they often sort of ostracized?
Pardon me, because while you were listing this, I was thinking of all of the stories I've heard from friends of mine who are all world-class sound mixers, and depending upon the genre of recording that they're in is completely different than someone else. Your relationship with the director of a movie where they're doing $100 million production is different than the director of a commercial who's doing $100 million commercial. But it depends on the experience of the director, what knowledge base they have in their pocket, and as I said before, do they know enough to know that they don't know enough? Okay. There are directors, or those who call themselves directors, who have no clue what it means. He says, we're going to shoot everything that moves, and we'll figure it out in post. Okay, that's one way to do it. Directors who use a storyboard, and every shot is a picture from the storyboard. And they'll go back and they'll take all the pictures and they'll put it together. It's like a jigsaw puzzle. Oh, here's this, here's this, here's this, here's this, here's this, here's this. Bingo, there's the picture. Terrific. Next. I like that kind of director. I like to work with somebody who knows exactly what he wants, understands that if he doesn't get it in 3 takes, it's his problem, and is not going to stand there and beat it to death for take 436 for a shot that's going to be on the screen for 3/4 of a second because nobody cares. Okay? We watch a movie, we watch in blocks. Even when you're sitting and talking to your wife, your boyfriend, your husband, your something or else, and there's this narrative going on, you jump from point to point to point to point. The little stuff in between, oh, and he dropped his spoon at that point. I don't give a shit. It's not germane to the story. Get me across the river. That's how I look at it. I watch movies. I can follow the story along. I know he's the good guy because he's bare-chested and has a bandolier with ammunition. Okay? I know he's the bad guy because he's got a beard and usually smokes a cigar and every other word out of his mouth is "fuck you." I can follow along. I went to school. There are, to get back to your original question, it all depends on the director. I've heard horror stories from friends of mine, and I will protect the innocent, about directors where the crew was looking to put together all of their money to have the person killed. It was cheaper to go to jail than to continue working with this director. Not that the director was a bad person, but because the director couldn't make a decision. Everything was, oh, let's do one more. Oh, one more. What for? For safety. I said, that image is on the same piece of media as that image. So if this piece of media burns up in flame, it's going to burn up all of the pictures. Yeah, but let's do one more. Maybe they can't make a decision. They are actually emotionally incapable. The reason is they're afraid. Because at a certain point, if you make a decision and you've got 22 takes of the same thing, and you go back into post, and all the people from the client, the customer, whatever, come and look, and they look at this thing and they go, yeah, but those are all good, but how come you didn't do the one with the flying elephants? And now they're devastated because they forgot getting the flying elephants into the shot was never a thing. They're afraid of being chastised. Directors are doing stuff for the real. What they're shooting today, that'll be on the air in 3 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, is going on the demo reel. So they can say, see what I did for XYZ? Right? You're always adding to your reel, which theoretically will get you work. And so hopefully somewhere within X amount of commercials or things is something that triggers the person who you want to hire you. I say, oh, this guy is terrific. Look, he works with aliens. We want that. They're working for the next job. Now, that's my interpretation, and 5,000 people could write me and say, you're full of crap, Eric. We're working for this. Yes, you're working for this, but you want to make it better so it looks good on your reel.
Sure. What if there's a new sound mixer coming up that's just starting out? What are some things some pieces of advice that you would give to them in order to build their career and get moving?
Okay. Understand, before you get into any of the technical stuff, to the right is loud, blah, 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 buy this, don't buy that. You have to look at what you're planning to do as a business. You're planning to support yourself and your family, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, on whatever money you make doing whatever it is you want to do. Sound mixers, by their very nature, are people who can't hold a full-time job. They're independent contractors. Your dentist is an independent contractor. You go to see Dr. Joe, he opens your mouth, he looks inside, he says, yeah, 2 cavities and a filling, and it's going to be that much money, and he does it, and you pay him, and he leaves. Understand that at this day and age, the dynamics of getting paid as an independent contractor are becoming more and more complicated. The problem is that your customers, corporations, especially the bigger corporations, and production companies who hire you, unlike you, where you have to pay your rent on the first of every month or make the mortgage payment for your bank or for your car, and if you miss a month or two, they're going to come and throw you out or something like that. Corporations are now insisting on a 90-day pay. So you do a job for them on New Year's Day. It's a demarcation point. You got all of January, all of February, all of March. You won't get paid till April Fool's Day. April 1st is 90 days. And the money that you were supposed to get on January 1st isn't worth it. Has no value anymore because prices have gone up. You needed the money on that day to take care of your obligations. You can make it work for 30 days, which was standard business payment terms. 90 days is ridiculous. And you can't change it because you have, as an independent contractor, no clout factor. You don't pay your rent, the landlord is going to evict you. Clout factor. You don't make a payment on your car, they're going to repo your car. Clout factor. You don't pay the electric company, you have no electricity. No clout factor. What are you going to do? Stand on the corner and scream and yell? They don't care. You want to work for us, and they know this. If you don't want to accept 90-day pay, and you're allowed, we'll find somebody who will. People guess, why do they do that? They used to pay in 30, then they went to 45, then they went to 60, then they went to 75. I don't know. Are they holding on to the money and making interest on it? Are they waiting to get paid? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The problem is, as an independent contractor, you're at the bottom of the food chain. You're the last in line. Nobody cares. And you don't stand alone. It's all of the other independent contractors on a job. The gaffer, the grips, catering, everything else is getting paid on 90 days. Why? I don't know, and I keep asking friends of mine, why don't you ask them? Why are you paying me in 90 days? It's like going up to the producer who's an idiot and going, why are you an idiot? If you know you're not going to work with them anymore, go up to them, why are you being such a pain in the ass? You don't have to be nasty to everybody. If you don't know what you're doing, don't fake it. Find another career. You've achieved your goal. You always said you wanted to be a director in the worst way. You've achieved that. You are a director in the worst way. You have no concept of what you're doing. I've walked off jobs where I couldn't stand the director anymore. He says, we're going to take one more shot. I said, it's two people walking down the beach. You can't hear them. You can hear the ocean and this and that. And they start 200 feet away, and they're about that tall, and they walk into frame, and they pass the camera by, and God knows where. I said, we've done this 9 times. I'm tired of sitting in the sand. If you do it one more time, I'm pulling the plug. I said, you've got it. Yeah, well, the angle of where she was standing next to where the water's coming up, he says, roll it. And I went, pew. He says, where are you going? He says, I'm leaving. He says, why? I said, because you're a moron. You've got it 9 times. The whole thing lasts 3 seconds. Nobody cares. It's the end of the story. You know, yes, I will go with you and fade to black. I don't care. You're not going to control my life because you don't know what you're doing.
What are some of the highlights of your career as a sound mixer? Are there any sort of bright spots that come to mind quickly? Maybe little short stories?
Yeah. The times that I've spent in recording studios, just doing audio, becomes a blur because there was so many years of doing the same kinds of things. The talent changed, but whether guys coming in to read copy for voiceover work, there are a lot of funny stories. Doing music, working with some great bands. I remember doing something when I was at Gotham with the Count Basie Orchestra. 18 guys. And we decided we were going to do them like it was a live performance. So we brought in risers, put up 2 microphones, one out here and one out here, and kind of put them there and opened 2 faders, left channel, right channel. I never heard 18 guys make so much noise in my life. It was music that was unbelievable, but loud, unreal. Everybody played at 150 dB, and yet you could walk outside in the room and go, oh yeah. When it stops you in your tracks, and you just go, these guys are having the time of their life. You remember things like that. A couple of other things I did, a Broadway play we recorded for record. I can't remember the name of it. It's about a newspaper. And I'll remember it long after. But we recreated the stage in the big studio at Gotham. So there were mics at the door and here because there was no visual to support it. So you had to get the people. It was like having a boom up with them, but we needed to hear, just like you'd see it in a live theater, somebody comes in that door, he sounds different as he moves across the stage. That was a lot of fun. I met a lot of people from the Broadway theater who became friends and have since passed on. In looking back, I don't regret the career path I chose. It was right for me. I remember one time walking into Gotham. I had been there for a year or 2 or 3, and hanging up my coat in the closet, and there was a mirror where you could kind of make sure everybody wore a tie back then. And I just stopped and looked, and I went, that's it. I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. I just knew it. That was the epiphany. There was I had passed the halfway point. Never, ever regretted it. Financial rewards aside, anything else. You never do anything just for money. As my dad told me once, he says, when it comes time to choose a career path, don't take the one that'll pay you the most money. He says, take the one that nourishes your soul, that feeds your heart. I can do that now because I have a pacemaker. He said, because you'll be happier in the long run doing something that makes you feel good about yourself and not just the fact that somebody's giving you $10, whatever.
What do you hope your legacy will be as a sound mixer? I mean, you have you influence a lot of people. You're well known, knowing technical things, how to put things together, and you've worked in studios and worked on films over the years. What do you hope people remember you for?
He was a pain in the ass, but a good one. There's not a lot, I have no fantasies about who I am and what I've done. And the career path that my life has taken is basically because it just seemed the right thing to do. It was not like I sat down and said, do I want to do this now? Do I want to do that now? It's just like, where do I feel more comfortable? I feel more comfortable at this point and realizing it's time to give back. Teach the people who are coming up, who don't have the benefit of coming up from the very, very beginning. I didn't come up from the very, very beginning, but I came up, in the late 50s, mid 50s, where everything was there was less food on the counter to choose from. You had a ham sandwich, you had a glass of milk, and you had this. That was dinner. You didn't have this giant plethora of food choices. You made do with what you have. Right? There are sound mixers. My very good friend Jeff Wexler, whose career path is phenomenal. Look him up on IMDb. His dad was Haskell Wexler, the cinematographer of movies. Most of he's done about 50 movies before he retired. And better than about half, a little more, were all done on a Nagra. One track. One track, one microphone. There was no going back. Or can we hear that? And in 90, pardon me if I'm wrong, Jeff, better than 90% of the movies he's done, the mono mix track that he did live was what was ended up being used in the movie. It was perfect. It was absolutely perfect. And that goes to both him and, unfortunately, his late boom operator, Don Sufal, who just passed away 2 weeks ago, unfortunately. One of the best boom ops ever. And they worked together as a team on 35 movies, and they were good friends and co-workers and mentors for each other. You have to listen when somebody says, why don't we try this and I like this better? Don't shut your mind. Open your mind up. Listen. And don't be afraid to say no.
Good advice. Good advice.
Don't be afraid to say no. Yeah, and it's the same thing that happens today with negotiating for rates. I know there's a whole thing on Facebook with people I know about, I got a call from this production company or this producer, and they only want to pay me, fill in a number for X number of hours, and I want to get this, and I want to get that. And there's this guy who's going to work for half of that. Yes, it all depends on how thick your wallet is at the time you get the call. If you need to pay the rent or pay the mortgage and your wife is screaming at you and your kids are hungry and you got to put food on the table, you'll take anything. Stuff happens. And if $300 is going to save you from eviction, take the $300 jobs. Well, somebody else will call. What do I do if nobody else calls? How do I do that? How do I explain that to my kid? Hasn't been any work. Or I've been following your advice. Hold the line. Hold the line. Yes, hold the line. Putting two guns to your head is not going to make you any deader than one gun. You do what you have to do at the time. You don't want to get in trouble with your friends? Keep your mouth shut. What they don't know, they can't comment on. Don't call them up and say, hey, I got this job. I'm working for $150 for 10 hours. You know they're going to ridicule you. Keep your mouth shut. And all of these people who say, well, I only work for this, and I only work for that, and I only work for that, full of shit. When the time comes, sometimes you got to lower your price a little bit. Right? It's funny. When you're selling, you want the highest price possible. And when you're buying, you want the lowest price possible. You do it every day you go shopping. You want to negotiate? Walk into the supermarket, buy a basket full of food. See if you can negotiate with the cashier when she says it's $140. And you go, well, I only got 50. She goes, choo, 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 choo. Now you got $50 worth of food. That's it. So I have no sympathy. I'm sorry that the marketplace is like this, but it's how business is done. If you're spending money, you want to spend as little as possible. If you're receiving money, you want to get as much as possible. It's done in the car industry, it's done in housing. Everything is negotiable. Don't be afraid to say no. Don't be dumb enough not to say yes.
Very good. I just want to ask you a few sort of quick questions,
Sure.
Just quick answers. If you had to choose one microphone, what would it be?
MKH50.
Yeah, if you had to have one mixer or recorder, what would it be?
Oh, 40 input SSL, but you mean the poor...
Maybe something that's commonly used, on film sets.
I've been a Sound Devices man. I helped Sound Devices get started 20 some odd years ago. I consulted with them on the 442, which is probably, to my ear, the best sounding portable mixer. It's not a recorder. It's a mixer that I ever heard. Theoretically, up in the top three. The Cooper portable mixer was gorgeous. I mean, it was just like unbelievable. It was so effortless, so clean. I had a Audio Developments 260, which is basically like a 442, which was just wonderful. And the 442, when that came out, in, I want to say 99 or 2000, had this big, huge, fat sound that people couldn't understand. They said, well, when you have giant input transformers on every input and giant output transformers, iron does something to the sound. Everything sounded like the voice of God.
Very good.
And
Shoot.
all of these mixers were analog mixers. There were no menus. Every function that you needed to do after you did some presets was there. There was an on-off switch for everything you wanted to do. You wanted phantom on? Click. Phantom off? Click. You wanted this? It was right there. You didn't have to go searching in a menu and push a button and scroll and this and that. Was it as flexible as you can get today with the new products from Zaxcom and Sound Devices? Probably not. The very fact that you have to go searching to how do I pan this thing over to that side? Well, first you have to go here, and then you have to go there, and then you have to do that. And I did that years ago with a friend of mine who had a digital mixer, and I had my 442. And I said, show me what you need to do. You have a microphone coming in, and you want to pan it from the center to the left only. And he went, oh. And he says, first you push this button, and then you rotate it to here. And I said, I finished 5 minutes ago. He goes, how? I said, see this? He goes, done. You don't learn anything. There's too much to learn. You don't You don't get your fingers dirty. You don't get in there. You don't get that feeling of, oh, that's how it kind of works. Right? I'm an analog guy. That's it. I grew up in the analog world with tubes. I know what I like to hear. I don't want to have to go through 5,000 steps to do something that used to be so simple. Yeah, well, but we can do this now and we can do that. And I said, just because you can doesn't mean you have to. You're recording one guy reading copy. This is not rocket science, right? Put the mic up, let him talk, and let him do his thing. Because by the time you add music to it, or sound effects, or something else, nobody cares anymore. You've muddled this. I remember working on a project once, and we're looking at a guy with a camera, and we're looking past him out the window to the garden. And just past the window, 5 feet from there, were some bushes. And the director got fixated on which way the leaves on the bushes were reflecting the light back into the room, and had the grips out there going, well, the light just isn't the right way and looking, and I could tell the gaffer there was going to be gunfire. And the gaffer went, I can fix that. He says, how? He went over and he says, poof, and he pulled down the shades, and you couldn't see out the window anymore. Or they'll leave it up there, and then the field of focus drops off just past the guy's nose, so his ear's blurred. You're not going to see something 15 feet behind.
Sure. Couple more real quick.
Sure.
Best boom pole brand?
They're all very, very good. Mm-hmm. What is best for me may not be best for you.
Sure.
You may not know how to evaluate it.
Or I should say favorite. Maybe if you had to choose one. Just kind of going through the main sound
That's
mixer
you
tools.
holding the pole, not me. I don't do, and very rarely ever did, one-man band. Mm-hmm. It's unfair. Can't do two things at once. And guys say, yeah, I do that. I say, yeah. How's your back? What do you mean? How much does that bag weigh that you got on your chest? 30 pounds. I said, really? Is your back hurt? Yeah, a little bit. I said, you know the only one who wants you to keep doing that? And they go, who? I went, your chiropractor. You're paying for his kid's college education. And it's true.
Fair enough.
That is cruel and unusual punishment. And people who accept that kind of work deserve every ounce of pain they get. Yeah, well, that's what happens. If you guys can stick together to hold the line, stop wearing the bag.
Very good.
If you all stop, they're not going to do it. Get a boom up. They got 9 guys in the camera department. You got 1 camera. Why can't you get a second guy for the sound department? Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, they won't pay for it. And fuck them. Let them find somebody who will. Because when you're 60 years old and you can't move anymore, or you're on some kind of pain medication, they're not going to care. If you don't take care of yourself now, I'm not going to do it in 20 years from now. And I know guys, I've known them a long time. They're in their very late 40s, mid 50s, and they're all going like, E. I said, stop doing it. Yeah, well, I got kids in college and I said, that's going to continue. All you can do is take pain pills for it. Yeah. What I'm telling the audience, the potential audience for this, is not so much about which toy is better than which toy. In the end result, you can't tell the difference anyway. You listen to a movie, you don't know whether the sound went through this brand of equipment or that brand of equipment. You know how to evaluate what you're hearing Is it good sound or bad sound? Of course, first you have to learn what good sound is and what bad sound is.
Great. And finally, if you had to have one pair of headphones, what would it be?
Ultrasound. Absolutely. The Ultrasound HFI, I'm not sure of the number, but it's the HFI series. I used to be, when I got started, I said, what headphones? Because I never monitored on headphones. You work in a studio, you don't wear headphones. The object of listening to music coming off speakers is to move as much air as possible. That's what speakers are for. You want live recreation, move a lot of air. The Sony 7506 are the de facto standards. And until you hear something better, they'll always be the de facto standards. And understand, this is my opinion based on what I've heard through my life. And I had an epiphany about 15 years ago, the first time I heard the ultrasounds, and I've been using them ever since. All of the problems that you have with the Sonys, and I'm going to be very careful where I tread, go away. And I have been asked this question before because I have a big mouth and talk about things that I like, that I know are game changers. To other people who said, what do you like in headphones? And I went, them, those. The guy said, for real? And I go, have I ever lied to you before? And they would say, I don't know. I said, see how good I am at it? I said, I'll make you a deal. I said, go buy a pair. I think they're about $100, $120, somewhere up around there. Take them home. Try them. Listen to them. If you don't like them, I'll buy them back from you. I won't give you all your money back, but I'll give you some money back. I got a brand new set of headphones for half price. Nobody's ever returned the headphones. And every time this question comes up on Facebook or on Jeff Wexler's site, and people come in and go, well, I have these ones, and I went, look, I can't talk about the buyers. I can't talk about the Sennheisers. I've heard them. They work. And my experience is limited. I said, I have not heard anything that I like better on many counts, not only acoustically, but physically. How tight they clamp my head and all the other things. The ultrasounds are the ones for me. And these guys say, listen to him. He knows what he's talking about. You know. Yeah, I recommend products. And there are a lot of products that I helped bring to the market. Because when I heard them, I went, really? How'd you guys do that? You know, aside from very well. And nobody has ever said, I didn't like what you recommended. There's a good friend of mine who I recommended the ultrasounds to, and he says, they make me dizzy. I said, it's not the phones. It's you.
Yeah.
It made him dizzy. Okay, who knows why? There are about 6 or 7 guys out there, top mixers, who run with ultrasounds and say, thank you for recommending them. They gave him a chance. My favorites, favorite all-around microphone would be the Sennheiser MKH50 and the new Sanken was a CSM1,
Which is what you're
which is what
being
I'm
recorded right now.
being recorded on now.
Just for reference, I'm on a CMET, Chef CMET.
Right. Courtesy of Rachel Cameron. It's getting close for St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah.
It's green.
It's a very nice green mic. Yeah.
I heard this microphone 2 years ago. This is December of 2019. In November in Atlanta at the Atlanta Mixer from Sanken. They said, listen to this. And I went, how did you do that? Microphone's 4 inches long. Outshines everything. It's $900. Buy one. Not because it's going to change your life, but it could. But because you can't afford not to be without it. It's only $900. It's $100 cheaper than a 416 and blows a 416 out of the water. It's better in many respects than the MKH50. It just sounds terrific. In fact, I'll get an endorsement. Rachel, how do you like the Sennheiser microphone?
Love it.
See that? Right there.
She said loves it. Very good.
My good friend Rachel says, did I lead you astray?
No?
Okay. That's it.
So, Eric, what would you say to the audio community of the future?
Looking back from when I started, when things were significantly different, less choices in gear, simpler ways of doing things because there was no other way. Both from studios, where we did the same thing we do today to a certain degree, in a different way, with less tracks. I spent most of my studio career recording sounds, music, people talking, etc., etc., etc. One track. You learned how to mix. That's the difference. You learned how to mix. And if you made a mistake, you went back to the top and did it again. Yeah, there were instances where you could say, well, there's a natural break here, so everything from the beginning to here is good, but the middle section sucks, so let's do the middle section. But the actual mix and balance of the sound sources, whether it be instruments or voices or people beating on tin cans, was put together and layered live at it while it was happening. Because you never wanted to do a take two. Take twos are boring. I've already seen what you can do for me. I don't want to see it again. You weren't that good to begin with. Is learn and understand how to mix. Try in whatever venue, whatever gear that you have, if you're going to be mixing music, and I use that term guardedly, open up your microphones just as normal. But don't spread them out to 19 tracks for 5 instruments. Put them on one track. One track. See, how does it sound? 2 tracks at best, because that's basically how it's going to be played back, no matter what post-production process it's going to go through. Eventually, all of those tracks are going to get pushed down till you have left and right. And somebody is always going to say, yeah, but I know about Yeah But. We're not talking about Yeah But. It's 2 tracks, 2 ears, 2 tracks. How does it sound? And just because you can does not mean you should. Do I think you should try it? Yeah, give it a shot. But if your 2-track mix works for you, then that's it. Unless, of course, but here's where the Yeah But comes in, somebody has paid you money to record his band. And he wants to go in and take the 5 guys and have 22 mics on the drums and 14 mics on the harmonica and blah, blah, and blah, blah, and blah, blah, and see if he can get a better mix. And he's going to pay you a lot of money. So you sell your soul cheap. Leave the money on the dresser. I'll get over it. Right? As you've heard me say, now that I got you in the boat, now what? Here's the 2-track mix. The audience, because somebody is going to hear this, whatever this is, whatever the sounds of this, they don't know what it's supposed to sound like. Is it in tune? Yeah. Is it clean and undistorted? Yes. Can you tell the harmonica from the kettle drum? Yes. Next. All right. Do you know the melody? Yeah. Can you sing along with the words? Yeah. Yeah, but, if we made the cowbell on track 23 louder, it might be better. But nobody knows there's supposed to be a cowbell on track 23. We're going to give lessons on how to wear headphones.
All right, I have one other thing.
Very good.
You'd mentioned your father. Will you color in a little bit of details about your father?
So earlier you'd mentioned your father and some how he influenced your life a little bit. Can you give a little bit more detail about him or your parents and kind of your upbringing and how that affected your
my
journey?
dad passed away at too young an age. He was 61, maybe 62 when he died back in 19. He would be, if he was alive now, he'd be 108. Good man. My mother and my father were big fans of live theater. I'll bet you they went to the Broadway theater at least twice a month. And I know they saw My Fair Lady and all of the major hits from 50, 60 years ago, like that. And they were not the kind of parents who doted on you, who tried to restrict you and say, don't do that, and don't do this, and don't do that. My father is, if I can put it in such a way, he says, if I tell you the top of the stove is hot, and if you touch it and you burn yourself, you should listen to me because I won't lie to you. And of course, being 5 or 6 or 7 years old, I didn't believe my father. So I put my hand on the stove, and I went, ow. And he said, what happened? And I went, boo-boo. Burned myself. He said, did I tell you the stove was hot? And I went, yeah. He went, don't touch it. It's hot. The point I think I'm trying to make is, they told you cross of the green, not in between. Don't hit. All of that stuff. And you figure out the rest, because that's the only way you're going to learn. Until you know what the downside is of what you're planning on doing, there's no comparison. I only like vanilla ice cream. Why don't you like chocolate? I don't know. Did you ever taste chocolate? No. You have no valid comparison. Well, my friend told me. I don't care. You need to experience the other side of the coin, because screwing up is the only way you get experience. So you know not to do that again. You have to be shown that what you're doing is wrong. And this is why it's wrong. Yeah, so we'll have to buy a new thing. But now you'll never have to buy a new thing again, because you know. And I brought up my children, I have a son and a daughter, the same way. Independent. I'll give you the basic rules. If I tell you it's hot, it's hot. Cross to the green, not in between. Don't hit your sister. End of discussion. I can remember. The kids were very young. My daughter's 4 years older than my son. She came into my room and she says, "He's hitting me." He was 5, she was 9, something like that. And at 9, she was bigger than him. He's hitting me. He won't leave me alone. We're watching television downstairs and he's hitting me. And I said, "Really?" I said, "Hit him back." And she looked at me. It never occurred to her to do that. She says, "I'm allowed to do that?" I said, "Anytime somebody's hitting you, you're allowed to hit him back." And she went, "Cool." And 3 minutes later, he came upstairs. He was crying. I said, "What happened?" He says, "Gwen hit me." I said, "Why did she hit you?" He says, "Because I was hitting her." I said, "What did you learn?" I shouldn't hit her anymore. My thing is kind of a reflection of my life to a certain degree. I hope I'm making this point. Try it. Worst could happen is my daughter will hit you. You'll find out that you failed. Hopefully you know the other side. If I turn left, this is what's going to happen. I think I should turn left, but maybe I'll turn right. Don't turn right. Why? Giant monsters are going to eat you. Yeah, but knock yourself out. And you come back and say, "What happened to your car?" "Giant monsters ate my car." "What did you learn?" "I'm not going to turn that way anymore." I won't lie to you. I and my ex-wife, like all parents, I love my kids, but they're adults. They make their own life decisions. And once they moved out of the house to go to college, thank God they're gone. I got them out of the boat. I was always there for them, but I never spoke to them every day. There are months that go by. I don't speak to them. My figure is no news is good news. My other favorite one is, it's not broken. Don't fix it. Leave it alone. If there's a time that comes in our mutual lives when it's broken, I'll try to help fix it. I'm not going to tell you how to live your life. You don't learn anything from me telling you how to live your life. But I react differently to that. I don't get crazy in the head if all I have is vanilla ice cream. and I want chocolate. It's ice cream. Don't worry about it. It's not going to change your life. Look at it, pull back, look at a wider shot. What's the downside of all of this? Well, if I give up this, I'll give up that, and this, and that, and the other. I remember once somebody telling me, I hate my job. I hate my job, I hate my job, I hate my job. I hate the person that I work for. They're mean, they're nasty, they're this, they're that, there's the other thing. I hate my job. I don't know what to do. And I looked at them and I said, quit your job. It offered a viable solution to resolving that problem. And they said, I can't quit my job. And I went, why? Well, I need the money, I have to earn, I have to put food on the table. I said, we're not talking about that. We're talking about you hate your job, you hate your job, you hate the people you work for. They beat you every week. If you quit your job, that problem is solved. Yeah, but. I said, I don't care about yeah, but. You said, how do I do this? I gave you a viable answer. It may not be palatable. It may not be the best answer, but it will solve I hate my job problem. You don't understand. I went, no. You don't understand. You said, how do I go from point A to point B? Do that. But that'll open up. I said, we weren't talking about that. And that's how I let people do it. You ask me for my opinion, I will give you my opinion. It is not law. It is not carved in stone. You know, what do you think of this shirt? What do you think of this? And I go, that's nice. I don't like that. What do you mean you don't like that? What part of no don't you understand? I don't like that. It doesn't make it wrong. It's wrong for me. Don't ask anybody's opinion. You know, does this make me look fat? Yes. How can you say that? It's easy. There are only two choices. Yes or no. Yeah, but. The comeback is always, yeah, but. If I turn to the left, it still makes you look fat. You find out that the object to life, and again, my opinion, is simplicity. Keep it simple. You know what KISS stands for? Keep it simple, stupid. Keep it simple. Find the simplest answer that solves the problem right then and there.
It's a good advice to finish on. Appreciate you taking the time today, Eric.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. If you enjoyed this, please like, subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with your friends. You can find links and information about our guests in the show notes or description below. Music by Ian Kreider. Thanks for listening.